Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I'm your guide, Derek Hayes. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another blood-curdling edition. I have a great, yet admittedly strange episode in store for you this evening. A lot of odd stories that were very difficult to categorize. But if I'm honest, it's collections like these that have the potential to make amazing episodes. So let's go ahead and get at it. And before we launch into our first call of the evening, for those of you that are new and unfamiliar with me, I call Lake Arrowhead, California home. It's a small mountain resort area, a mile high into the mountains, about an hour and some change outside of downtown Los Angeles. Now, the area here was first settled by Europeans when Mormons, gold miners and trappers made their way up from the desert floor in the late 1800s. The lake, then known as Little Bear, went under construction as a reservoir planned to send water down to the citrus groves and redlands, a dozen or so miles straight down the mountain. Now, due to some watershed claims and a few lawsuits, the lake's initial use was never implemented. Instead, some resort-minded folk and early Hollywood producers took interest. Dozens of early films were shot here, leading to many of the stars attached to purchase lakefront mansions. But it wasn't only movie stars that flocked to this mountain hideaway. In the 1920s and early 30s, many well-known gangsters set up shop in the nearby Arrowhead villas. The crown jewel of this operation may have been the social building, then rumored casino, speakeasy, and brothel, the Tudor House, and the hotel across the street, the Brackenfern Manor. The joint, then known as Club Arrowhead in the Pines, and the adjacent hotel, formerly called the Crib, were built by the infamous mobster and real estate developer, Bugsy Siegel, whom you may know as the father of Sin City itself. But more on that here in a bit. Now, given its ties to the mob, you might imagine there were many reports of murders that took place on the properties, even suggestions that some victims were buried beneath the grounds of the buildings themselves. And like with any other place associated with violence, there might just be some sort of paranormal holdover.
A number of apparitions have been seen haunting its grounds. From a former caretaker who was rumored to have been thrown to his death from a third-story window, to a madam of the night who was murdered or died by suicide, and even a young boy who was allegedly trampled to death by horses. Laden with debauchery and crime, it's no surprise this inn is considered to be one of the most haunted locations in California.
That clip was courtesy of Paranormal Caught on Camera, a little show featuring yours truly. Season 3, Episode 10, if you'd like to check out the episode. Now, I've moseyed around the grounds during a craft fair a few years ago. Last I heard, the place was actually up for sale. If funds were nothing, I'd snatch that place up and open a paranormal museum. But for now, perhaps an investigation is in order. Now, I've linked to a clever little documentary on the properties in the show notes if you're interested. Now, it certainly seems like Bugsy and his gang are still around. I imagine his spirit can be felt in his other playground as well, Las Vegas, where he helped fund and design the Vegas staple, the Flamingo Hotel. And that brings us to our first entry of the evening, a story straight out of Vegas and the Flamingo itself. Please welcome our anonymous caller to the program.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Joe from New York. I just started listening to your podcast, and I think it's great so far. My story actually, I have many stories. I feel like I've had paranormal experiences pretty much since I was about 6 years old. I saw an entity when I was about 6. And then ever since then, I've had everything from things flying off of coffee tables in front of me to spirits staring me down, pissed off at me, and all sorts of craziness, whispering and everything else. But my story that I'd like to tell you right now takes place in 2001. My parents, myself, and my friend Dave, we had went to Las Vegas, and we were both 21, my friend Dave and I, and we went to Las Vegas. We stayed at the Flamingo Hotel. The reason why I picked this story was because I figured you might be able to do some research, or somebody might have, and I'd love to hear what you guys have on it. So I believe it might have been either our last night there or our second to last night there. I wake up in the middle of the night. Now, my friend and I had one room. My parents had a different room down the hall. So I wake up in the middle of the night, and I look over. My friend is sleeping. And then I look in front of me, and I see two figures. Now, it looked like one of them was kind of a heavy-set man, and he was standing in front of my friend's bed, almost like looking at him. And it looked like he was holding something in his hand, possibly a martini glass or something of the sort. The other figure I saw kind of far away on the other side of the hotel room. I'm not really sure what it was doing, but it looked like something was moving fast over there. Now, the first thing I thought was, holy crap, we're being robbed. But as I looked closer, I realized that these were not living people. Since I've had many experiences by this point, I knew to just look and try and observe and to try and figure out what I'm looking at. And I couldn't. Now, I know people say sleep paralysis, but I had sat up in my bed and I looked at these two figures, and then I said, holy crap. I tried waking my friend up. He wouldn't wake up. So then I laid back down. I pulled the covers over my head because, it was kind of making me nervous, a little scary. And then I took the covers off, and the figures were still there. So then I wrestled around a little bit more, and I, did a couple more things. And then I looked over, and they were gone. A couple days later, when my friend and I had gotten home, I looked it up on the internet, and it had said that the Flamingo Hotel is haunted by the person that used to own it. He was a monster named Bugsy Siegel. And I feel that might have been the person I saw. I don't know what the other entity was, or the other figure, but I definitely know I saw sort of portly man standing in front of my friend's bed, holding something, staring. So what this article that I had read said was that he appears in people's rooms within the Flamingo Hotel. So that's my story. I'll definitely be calling back with some others, and I'd like to know what you guys think of that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, caller. I should point out that Siegel was shot to death by an unknown gunman in Beverly Hills in 1947. He never saw the Flamingo in its heyday. And I don't know about you, but that'd be enough to keep me around for a while, in the ghostly form, so to speak. That's almost the epitome of unfinished business. And I've actually stayed in the Flamingo once. I don't recall any ghosts on that visit, but come to think of it, I don't recall much of that trip in general. But that's Vegas for you. At any rate, thanks again, caller, for sharing the tale. Now, our next entry comes to us from the opposite side of the paranormal spectrum. Please welcome Cody from the state of Oregon to the program.
Hey there, Derek. My name is Cody. I'm calling from Southern Oregon. First off, just wanted to say I love the show. I've been listening for a long time now, and keep it up. Anyways, I just kind of wanted to report, share my little experience that I had probably about 5 to 6 days ago. I live out in Grants Pass, Oregon, and I'm headed towards the middle of town, taking the same street I always do home, kind of just minding my own business, listening to my music, all that fun stuff. And I get up to the intersection that I normally turn onto my street to head home. And for whatever reason, I'm looking up at the sky. Keep in mind, it's probably about 7 o'clock at night. It's about mid-October here, so it's dark out. But for whatever reason, I look up at the sky just about behind my mirror. If I'm looking through my windshield, I see a bluish green light, just kind of sitting in the sky. And I kind of slow down before I turn in the intersection. And I'm looking at this thing, and all of a sudden it just slowly picks up speed and then shoots off into the sky, just directly horizontal. Looking at the map, it would have been headed directly west, and it just took off with such a high speed that I was just kind of baffled about how fast it was moving. And I wasn't really sure what to think of it at first. I went home right away, told my roommate, and she kind of didn't believe me at that point in time. I didn't know what to believe myself. I've always been very skeptical about this kind of thing. You know, listening to your podcast, I love all that stuff, and I love my sci-fi movies just as much as the next guy, but never expected I'd actually see something I couldn't exactly explain. The next day I was out in my car just trying to get a reflection on the inside of my vehicle to match up with where it popped up on the windshield, just in case it was some weird reflection, or trying to think if it could be another driver's headlights, but there was no one on that road, no one in front of me, no one behind me. I'm a very attentive driver, and so I'd remember something like that, especially on that intersection, because there's usually a lot of traffic. But big bluish, greenish light just kind of sitting in the sky, and I slowed down to look at it, and then it just shot off into the dark. I had my windows up, I had my music going, so I don't know what kind of noise it could have made, but I don't know. It was just kind of one of those weird experiences. Can't really explain, and just was curious your thoughts on it. Anyways, thank you for what you do. I appreciate all the time and effort you put into making these, and keep it up.
Thanks, Cody. On the latest episode of Monsters Among Us Beyond, over on Patreon, I spoke about a recent sighting Sarah and I had of something flying and unidentified. Ours behaved more like a high-altitude plane or possibly a repositioning satellite. Nothing like the wild encounter Cody just spoke of. I mean, the rate of travel alone separates the two. But while we're discussing UFOs in the Pacific Northwest, did any of you catch that light show last Thursday? Apparently, something went awry with a recent Falcon 9 reorbit.
Strange lights streak across the night sky. Is it a plane? A meteor? A visitor from another world? Well, in this case, the lights that were seen in the skies across the Pacific Northwest was basically space junk. The National Weather Service has since confirmed that the bright lights were likely debris from a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket that did not have a successful deorbit burn. People looking up Thursday night in parts of Washington State, Oregon, and British Columbia and Canada were left speculating as to the cause of the lights, with some even wondering if it was a UFO.
Now that clip was courtesy of Global News. Now I guess folks from Vancouver all the way to Portland were able to see it. So check out those show notes for a visual, and thanks again, Cody, for sharing your story. And if you have a true experience you would like to hear played on the show, call the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. Or visit the website at monstersamonguspodcast.com for more submission options. And a reminder to those that have emailed written submissions. While I appreciate and welcome those entries for future use in print, if you want your story shared on the show, you should definitely call it in or record an audio file and email it to me. And don't forget, I'm always accepting photos, videos, and other evidence for use in future video projects. So submit those to mauvideosubmissions@gmail.com. Now next up, we join up with Marcy. Marcy, the mic is yours.
Hi, Derek. My name is Marcy, and I love your podcast. I've been listening to it for a couple weeks now. I have an experience to share that happened to me about 4 years ago. I would like to say that I saw Bigfoot, but that's not what happened, but hopefully someday. What happened to me was I had just finished nursing school and had been working on weekends while in school, and I moved into my friend's house. I was going through a hard time, a breakup, and had to move quickly. So my friends were kind enough to offer me a bedroom in the attic of their farmhouse that was built in 1917. The house is in a rural part of Washington State, about 30 minutes south of the Canadian border, along the I-5 corridor. When I moved in my friend's house, I was trying to get more hours at work and was really stressed out about getting enough work. I started working for a local nursing agency to pick up some random shifts at different facilities, and I was working all different shifts, and my routine was really messed up, working days and evenings and nights. And one morning I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to be at work by 6, and I didn't set my alarm correctly. I usually have dreams several times a week, and I've never had an experience like this before, so I strongly believe this incident happened to me. It was different from a dream because it was an actual physical occurrence. So it was about 4:30 or close to there, and I was supposed to get up, and I was sleeping pretty soundly when I felt my bed shake a little. And since I was sleeping, I thought I was dreaming that someone was moving furniture or something on the other side of the wall. But my bed was on the second story in the attic, and there was no other room or anything on the other side of the wall. It was just the outside. There were no trees or anything that could have been bumping the wall. And I remember just rolling over toward the wall and feeling a little annoyed because I was tired and wanted to sleep. Well, a few seconds later, the whole bed actually shook, and I could feel the vibration through my whole body. And now, I used to live on a fault line prior to moving into the attic, and I have actually had my bed vibrate in the night before from an earthquake. So at that point, I thought it was an earthquake. As I was laying there contemplating if we were having an earthquake, the right side of the foot of the bed came up off the floor, probably 2 or 3 inches, and then dropped to the ground as if someone lifted the corner of the bed and then dropped it. And by that time, I had rolled over onto my back, and at the right corner of the foot of my bed, I saw a tall, slim, human-shaped shadow standing there. There was no distinguishing features to the shape. It kind of looked like it could have been wearing a cloak or a hoodie or something, because it just kind of swooped down from the head to the body without, you couldn't really see shoulders or defining, where the head and shoulders met. And I couldn't tell if it was male or female. And it had no face or anything. It was just a shadowy shape. And there was a window behind it, so I could see that it was clearly there, and then it was gone in a few seconds. I don't remember being scared. I just got up and turned on the lights, got dressed and ready, went to work. I did have the feeling that this shape was annoyed with me, but it wasn't threatening. It was like, get up, get out of bed. That kind of a feeling, kind of like a parent would be if they're annoyed with their child and they're not getting up for school. That's how it felt. And that night I asked my friends if they had ever had any weird experiences in that house, and they raised 3 girls in that house, and they said, no, nobody's ever mentioned anything. There was nothing weird ever going on. And they just kind of laughed off my experience as stress-related, and maybe it was, but it was really real for me, and I've never had anything like that happen before. I don't think it was a ghost in the house. It may be a being or something sent to get me up so I wouldn't be late for work. Whatever it was, never came back again, but I'll never forget that experience. Thanks for letting me share, and thank you for your awesome podcast. And I've been listening for a couple weeks while driving around for work, and I love it.
Thank you, Marcy. Another helpful ghost. I remember on a not-so-recent episode of one of the podcasts I enjoy, Bigfoot Collectors Club, the guys over there had a guest on that talked about the ghost in their house, alerting her to a fire in the entranceway. And it also sort of harkens back to the days when I was building the studio here. The odd voice that I swear I would hear telling me I was making a mistake in not-so-nice words. So I suppose, Marcy, if you were going to experience these strange and often spooky circumstances, why not put them to some use? And thanks again for sharing the entry. As I was slapping this episode together, it dawned on me. We haven't done a disappearing stranger story in quite some time. So here, to rectify that situation, is Christian from the Keystone State of Pennsylvania.
Hey, yeah, my name is Christian. I'm calling from Pennsylvania. My story, I don't know if you can classify it as an angel or a ghost, but it took place years ago. I had to have been 12, 13 years old. I'm 44 now. My parents and I, we were coming through Texas, coming home from 2-week vacation, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, all that. And it was late at night, and we come through this town, and there was a shopping center, and this homeless lady with a grocery cart was standing there. And my dad, he's always looking to take care of anybody, everybody. So we turned around, went back, found a little restaurant. Like I said, it was at night, but they still served, I can't remember if it was biscuits or a hamburger or something. But he got her a hamburger and a drink. And we went back to where she was. He gave her the bag, and she started asking questions like, what if it's this, what if it's that? And the one thing that she asked that I'll never forget is, what if it's manna? And if I'm not mistaken, I think manna is some kind of holy bread or something like that. Well, my dad was like, you don't have to ask all these questions, just take it as food. And we went to pull off. She took it, we pulled off. And he looked down and he still had her drink in a cup holder. So we haven't gone 20 feet, 30 feet at the most. And he stopped. He was going to put it in reverse and back up. Now, when I said that we found this lady in the middle of a shopping center, picture a shopping center about 200 yards lengthwise. No alleys in the middle, no nothing. And she's square in the middle. And when he backed up, she was gone. No sign, no trace, no nothing. No buggy, no woman, no trash, no nothing. No signs of anybody being there. And he chalked it up to it being an angel. My mom said maybe it was something that the Lord sent to see if we would stop and help or what. But I don't know. Let me know if you've heard of anything similar. I binge listen all these podcasts. I'm a letter carrier for the post office, and while I'm walking my 12-mile route, that's all I'm listening to. So I appreciate what you're putting out, bud. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, given the circumstances, there aren't many options here. But having lived in Los Angeles for a decade, I saw my fair share of homelessness. Tent and makeshift shelter after another, or sometimes blocks. It's a tragic situation that doesn't seem to get the awareness that it really should. But it's in those experiences that I learned part of their survival is to be hidden, to find a safe space to pass the time, a place where they likely won't be hassled. Many times I'd been walking down the sidewalk and nearly step on someone sleeping. The point I'm getting at is that perhaps this mysterious woman simply had a spot that she was able to quickly retreat to and be safe and hidden to enjoy her meal. Now I know it's not as exciting as a paranormal encounter, but that's an option, in my opinion. Regardless, it's a great story, Christian, so thank you for sending it in. Now before we move on, a quick reminder that the Monsters Among Us merch store is quickly growing. Sarah is placing a massive t-shirt reorder, and the brand new posters are here. $10 a piece, autographed. It's a heck of a deal. And those long-awaited patches, I heard they're finally on the way. And Sarah and I are excited to announce that we're donating a portion of the proceeds of the cryptid totem poster design to the Navajo Water Project, a nonprofit committed to bringing running water to the homes of the nearly 2.2 million Americans currently living without it, beginning with our friends at the Navajo Nation. So grab a poster, support a good podcast, and a great cause today. That's monstersamonguspodcast.com/shop. Now, do you guys want to see some magic? Ladies and gentlemen, the great Elias from Utah.
Hello, Derek. My name is Elias Caress. I am a magician in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm sure that you know what a seance is. It's where a group of people try to make contact with spirits or ghosts. Well, years ago, I did a seance magic show. Is where I do a magic show, basically, but I pretend like it's ghosts performing the magic tricks. Well, it is considered unethical to make people believe that it is actually really ghosts doing these things, but it was all for fun, right? So when I first started doing this, I would make it very clear that I am a magician, this is a magic show, this and that. But when the scary, spooky, ghostly phenomena started happening, people laughed. And that wasn't the reaction I was going for. So I started being a little bit more ambiguous, trying to make the show a little bit more scary, add a little bit more realism to everything. And what I was going for, I didn't want people to actually believe that it was real, but I wanted them to think like maybe there's something to it. That was what I was going for. But one day we had a guy, a very brave guy. He had a lot of bravado, and he said before the show started, "I want to see the devil tonight. Show me the devil." Those are his exact words. And so the show started. We started doing the seance, the magic show, and the portion of the show came about where all the participants hold hands and the lights go out. And then ghostly phenomena starts happening. It was really all, of course, just magic tricks. But suddenly the guy's wine glass right in front of him shatters, and pieces of glass hit him in the face. I think glass must have hit some of the other spectators because they screamed, and the guy wanted to stop the show right there. I had to stop everything we were doing right then. And the guy was pissed. He was freaked, and he was definitely not happy. And some of the other spectators are not happy here. But here's the unexplained part. I didn't break that glass. That wasn't one of my magic tricks. And all of the spectators were holding hands, and I went to a lot of trouble to arrange it so that spectators couldn't do something like break a glass without the other spectators knowing exactly what happened. So, if I didn't break the glass and none of the spectators broke the glass, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But I had to stop doing the seance shortly after that for money reasons. It didn't really make a lot of money. But I hope you enjoyed my story, and thanks for the awesome podcast. Have a great night.
Thank you, sir. I doubt I would have the same composure that Elias did. I'm afraid I'd then adopt and continue the charade, anything to further terrify the blowhard. The way I look at it, public uncontrollable urination would probably signal my victory. No, all kidding aside, what a wild story. Now, it's easy to dismiss magic when you see it on TV or your goofy friend tries to perform it. But having spent some time in Hollywood's Magic Castle, an exclusive club of magicians and the like, of which I was only a visitor and not a member, I'm nowhere near that cool. But having been there a few times, I can tell you, good magic up close is a lot of fun. And dare I say, believable. So thanks again, Elias, for sharing your tale and for sharing your craft. Now, as if that last one wasn't weird enough, this next one will take it up a notch. Please join me in welcoming John from California to the program.
Hey, Derek, this is John calling from Palm Springs area again. I actually just had something happen to me last week. It was really weird, and wanted to hear your thoughts on it, or if you've heard somebody mention this before. But the other night, me and my wife were already in bed, and I got up, went to the kitchen, got a bottle of water, came back, and I laid down, checked my phone real quick, and put it down. And I closed my eyes, and I can hear a conversation all of a sudden. So I look at my phone again, make sure I didn't start a video or a podcast or nothing, and nothing. My phone was blank. So I put my head back down, and I could hear a conversation again. It sounded like two women speaking to each other. Couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could definitely hear two female voices. And I would take my head off the pillow, and I wouldn't hear nothing. And I would put it back down, and I could hear them. Did for about another 30 seconds, and I got up, and I kind of couldn't sleep after that again. When I did go back, lay down, I didn't hear nothing like that again. So yeah, I mean, it was just kind of odd. I mean, I really like your thoughts on it. It was just, yeah, it was odd. Thank you again, and you take care.
Thanks, John. If I were forced to take a stab at a logical explanation, I suppose I would suggest exploding head syndrome. Basically, your brain invents loud bangs, explosions, or even voices, just as you're starting to fall asleep. You hear them, but only in your head. They're not real, audible sounds. So, could that list of possible sounds include what John heard? If not, I struggle to think what else it could be. You know, when I was very little, my cousin, she's a year younger than I am, she had an imaginary friend that talked to her through the vents in the floor. Idrel was its name. And it was twice as creepy as it sounds. I even thought that at 6 years old. Now, John's story gives me Idrel vibes for sure. So good luck with that one, John. But a big thank you for taking the time to share the story. Now, we're getting down toward the bottom here, but before we finish up, if you love the show and aren't looking for merchandise, consider snagging yourself 44 brand new episodes, plus a ton of bonus content over at our Patreon page. Here's how it works. Visit www.patreon.com/Monsters Among Us Podcast. Select a pledge level you're comfortable giving, and submit the necessary info. You will be emailed your own link to listen to the entire back catalog, to the point that your level allows. You will then be charged that amount monthly until you decide to cancel. Now, the good news here is that I'm pumping out typically 2 episodes a month, so new stuff is coming in all the time. And again, you can cancel this at any time. I promise I will not be disappointed. Remember, the more support we get at places like Patreon, the fewer ads we need to run to keep the lights on. And now, we stay in the state of California. This time, Leo has a tale to tell.
Hi, my name is Leo. I live in California, and this is a story about when I was a teenager. I was probably around 16, 17 years old, and my family is deeply religious. And like any family, we're Hispanic. When you have a visit come over, like an aunt or an uncle, they would always sleep in the room with the biggest bed, besides the master bedroom, and that was my room. This weekend, my aunt came down from Los Angeles, and she slept in my room like any other weekend. Unbeknownst to me, my cousin, who lived with them, had been practicing black magic. I'm talking about rituals. I'm talking about, delving into the occult to the fullest. He had little statues that he had made of different demons and things, and full bore into the black magic. He doesn't do it anymore, but at that time he did. And that's what the atmosphere that she was coming from. So she slept in my room like any other weekend, and when she left, I moved back into my room. It was a Saturday night. I always slept in my room with the door closed, door locked, the teenager, every teen wants their privacy, of course, and I locked my door, and my door was completely pitch black. So pitch black that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face most nights. So I remember I played on my Nintendo DS for a while, and I fell asleep. Upon waking up, my room, of course, is pitch black, I'm laying flat on my back, and I opened my eyes, and at the foot of my bed, there was a figure. Now, this figure was not, like the shadow figure so many have talked about. This figure was completely white. There was no facial features, nothing. It was just white. And judging by how its shoulders were postured, I could tell it was either looking at me or it was looking at the opposite side of the room. My bed was on one side of the room facing the closet, and the door to enter into the room as well as the light switch. So I kind of closed my eyes and said, I just woke up, I'm probably seeing things. Like I said, I'm a religious person, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts per se up to that point. I stayed awake for about another 15 minutes, had my eyes closed, and then I reopened them, and it was still there. So at this point, I realized, this is not a joke. This is not something that I'm dreaming. This is real. So I closed my eyes again, and I kind of started to think through my options. What am I going to do to get out of this? First thought, of course, is to turn the light on. But my light switch is on the other side of the room. What if this thing tries to grab me, or something happens? So I kind of tossed that one out. Like every kid, I thought maybe I could yell for my parents, but don't ask me why. I thought, what, my parents, especially my dad, has to wake up early tomorrow. We have church. I don't want to wake them up. My dad will get up at 5:30 to go help out on a bus run that the church had. I don't want to do that. I don't want to wake him up early and have him be exhausted. So now I'm kind of running out of options, and then it hit me. I always had my Nintendo DS on the nightstand next to my bed. The reason was it had a very strong light, strong enough to illuminate the whole room. So I thought to myself and said, I can use that to open it and maybe, figure out what this is. So I started to roll over in my bed and, very slowly move. And I tried to get there without it moving, without it coming to get me or something, whatever. But I rolled over to try and grab it, and I kept my eye creaked open just to watch it to see if it would move. It didn't. In the time that it took me to grab that DS and open it, it was gone. So I got up very quickly, of course, looked around the room, nothing, turned the light on, and nothing happened. There's nothing there. So I at that point, I started to get scared a little bit. Kind of had to use the bathroom after that. So I went and used the bathroom, nothing weird there. I walked back into my room, and as soon as I shut my door, the temperature dropped. It had to have dropped at least 20 or 30 degrees, and I know this because as soon as I walked back into my room, my teeth started to chatter uncontrollably, and I broke out into a cold sweat. So now I'm terrified. I hopped back into my bed. I laid out 2 or 3 more blankets, and I'm huddled under these blankets, and I'm shivering. My teeth are chattering. I'm sweating. Like I said, I'm religious, so on the side of my bed, I had a Bible that I would read, and I had a book that was called The Power Through Prayer. I grabbed both of those, and I started to read what I could, and I started to pray, and I felt the temperature slowly begin to rise back up, and I finally fell asleep. Next day, I told my mom about it, and she was terrified, of course. I told my dad, and, I had to tell my pastor, kind of wanted him to help me out to figure out what to do with the house. And we were renting this house. And pastor said, okay, give me 2 days, till Wednesday, and I'll come over on Wednesday and we'll see what I can do. So that Wednesday, I went to the church school there, and I stayed basically at school and at church all day. So my dad home late from work, so he didn't go to church. So my dad starts to go through every room trying to cleanse our house. And he gets to his room, and it's the last room he hasn't done yet, and it's got a big sliding glass door. He opens that glass door, and he starts to tell it, you need to leave. We don't want your presence here. We're a God-fearing family. And he makes a kicking motion with his foot. And he said that as soon as he kicked that kicking motion, that all the dogs in the neighborhood started to go crazy. And I'm talking about howling, barking, running around uncontrollably. Neighbors didn't know what was going on, and I truly believe that animals can sense these type of things. So I think it sensed whatever spirit my dad cast out of our house. And it's pretty incredible. My pastor came over after church that night, said he didn't feel anything, didn't see anything, and that wasn't the last time that something happened, but definitely that was my scariest time where I had encountered something. After that, I never saw that figure again. But to think it was in my room, I've always wondered, did my aunt bring it with her unknowingly because of what my cousin was doing? Was it a manifestation of those rituals that he was doing at his house? So I don't know. But I know what I saw, and I'm sure of it. And like I said, it wasn't the first time and it wasn't the last, but it was definitely my scariest. So let me know what you think. Love your podcast. Just found it, been going through it pretty quickly. Really enjoyed it. So keep up the good work, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. It's never a good sign when you close your eyes, open them, and the thing is still there. Something about that makes any situation much more real. Perhaps we're conditioned from tropes on television. But I guess the same can be said for every dog in the neighborhood going off at once. Certainly creepy stuff, Leo. And it sounds like whatever your dad did, it worked. And we're certainly happy to hear it. Thanks again for the call. All right, folks. With tonight's final entry, please welcome Michael to the program.
Hello, my name's Michael. I'm currently going through that Hurricane Hannah. I'm kind of stuck at work, so I thought I'd call in my story. So I have an abduction story. So it was 1996. My parents couldn't afford a house phone because my uncle had run up a bill. So I would spend all my time talking to my girlfriend from the gas station across the street. My dad got tired of it, so he ended up buying a cordless phone. So one day I get home from school, and I'm talking to my girlfriend now from the house, and I'm like going to different places, like, hey, I'm in the restroom, or hey, I'm in the backyard, or just, typical things 14-year-old, 15-year-old would be saying, I guess. So my dad gets home from work, and I go and I sit in his car, and I'm like, hey, well, I can sit here and talk. And the car is parked in the driveway right in front of the house, and I can see my dad eating his supper. So the sun's starting to go down, and I'm still in there probably talking about things I shouldn't be talking about. Starts to get like that crepuscular kind of like sunlight or twilight type of lighting. And the car was literally parked like maybe a foot or 2 feet from the house. So I'm in the driver's seat, and from the right-hand side, I was like at an angle facing the other direction, and I start to see like out of the corner of my eye, I was still on the phone, I start to see like a white head or like a cotton ball head like coming around. And at that moment, I guess I just kind of thought it was my grandmother because she had that classic white ball of cotton hair kind of thing. I eventually started to focus on the being, I guess you could just say, as it's coming across, and I'm looking at it, and I'm kind of in shock at what I'm looking at, I guess. I'm trying to make sense of it, right? So it's coming across in front of the vehicle. It's not looking at me. It's like looking inside the house. So I'm talking to my girlfriend, and I'm like, hey, somebody's here. She's like, who is it? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it, and it's like looking inside the house. And at this point, my father had already gone back to his room or whatever. So I'm just sitting there, and I go, I better confront this thing, right? So I tell my girlfriend, hey, hold on real quick. And as I'm making the movement to put the phone on the passenger seat, a second being, initially he didn't see me, but in the process of putting the phone down, it turned the corner, and it caught my hand movement, I suppose. At the very same time, it locked eyes on me, and that very instant, the one that was in front of the car just fell, like it just disappeared, like it like just went down. And the one that caught my eyes, there was like this weird pull, like a movement, like there was this movement that I can't get out of my head because like it got me stuck. When I was moving to put the phone down, we locked eyes, and he did this like kind of like an oops, he's looking at us, right? But when he did that, he pulled me in. And the next thing I remember, I'm just getting out of the car, and I guess like part of me still trying to make sense of it, and I'm like trying to confront whatever's there, and all I see is possums, and I'm like, which is weird because normally I'm scared of possums, like growing up, they ate my cats and stuff. And then the next thing I remember, it's like 7:30 in the morning. And my dad's like, hey, stop leaving this phone in the car because I'm going to take it to work, and your mom's going to get mad at me, and this and that, this and that. I'm like, what? Because to me, I had just been in the car. Like, all of a sudden, I'm being woken up, and I'm inside the house. Years later, I'm watching something, or I'm looking at something, and I come across the Skinny Bob footage. And that terrorized me because that is exactly what was in front of my grandmother's house in 1996. Down to the very movements of the fingers, the way the head moved, the way the cheekbones looked. If that Skinny Bob footage is a fake, then it was made by somebody who's actually seen these beings, because that is exactly what I saw. Now, fast forward to maybe, it was like maybe 5 years ago. I just met my current wife, and all of my experiences happened at my grandmother's house. she's no longer with us. She was with us at that time because I thought for some reason that was her. But anyways, at this point, she was no longer alive, and I was living in there with my cousin. My girlfriend had moved in. It's something about that movement that I spoke about earlier. So I had woken up to go to the restroom. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I come back and I'm shirtless and I'm laying there. And anybody from the area knows that the Stripes, the local gas station, has amazing tacos. So I was like, should I go get some tacos? So I'm just laying there thinking this. And I was like, maybe I should go get some, and maybe I should have them for breakfast for my girlfriend when she wakes up. And I'm just sitting there when all of a sudden the whole left side of my body starts to freeze, but freeze, like a really weird cold. I mean, I was sitting there and with my shirt off, the AC is on. I can feel the AC, but for some reason the left side of my body is like frigid. And then I decided to cover myself, but I couldn't move. All of a sudden I couldn't move. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. This must be what that movement where you can't move at night. Anyway, so I'm like, oh, that's what this is. Like, okay, I'll just wait it out, right? So then I'm just kind of waiting there, still trying to decide whether I'm going to go get some tacos or not. All of a sudden, I realize, oh, I can open my eyes. So I'm just sitting there looking around in the room, right? So I'm scanning the room from right to left, which my wife was on my left side facing down, and I was facing up. As I'm scanning the room, I notice that there's this dark spot where the cold is. And then I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, what am I looking at? They're like, so I scan to the left, and I can see a little bit of light starting to come in for the morning. I scan to the right, I can see to the right, but there's this dark spot right over me, right next to her. So I start to realize that there's some movement in there. So as I'm focusing, I realize that there's a being over me facing her, and it's crouched as you would imagine. Everybody's seen those images of like the succubus or the incubus that's sitting on the person. Well, it was like that, but it facing away from me, and it had a little stick in its hand, like a little wand, and it's rubbing it over my wife's lower back. At that moment, I freaked. I'm like, okay, I can't move, and I need to move. So I couldn't do anything, but the only thing that I could muster was because I was trying everything I could to get up. And when I did that, this thing turned around and looked at me, and it gave me that same pull feeling, because it looked at me and it did like, ooh, like uh-oh, but like it was that movement, and it had the same shaped head because it was literally right in front of me. So as soon as it saw me, it turned around and jumped over me, and I clearly remember seeing the foot trail over me and into the wall. At that moment, I mean, I was awake as far as I know. So I bust up, and I sit up, and I'm stuck in like, what just happened? So I look at my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, should I wake her? And I'm like, so I lay back down for a second, and she wakes up on her own, crying. And I'm like, hey, are you okay? And I'm just wondering if I should tell her or not. And she's like, I just had the worst dream ever. And I had to tell her what I saw. And needless to say, that was the last time we stayed at that house. That house is, I've had so many experiences, but those are the two that I can link together because of the way that creature, and I mean, I hate to say it, but that shadow person was the alien. And I come to realize that the sleep paralysis was being caused by the cold, like it was like a vibration almost. And after that, I asked God, like, I need to understand this because I've technically experienced this kind of thing my entire life. And it's kind of like a long thing, but if you go into the cerebrospinal fluid and how it connects to the chakras and how it connects to the pineal gland, I knew that this thing was doing something around the sacrum. And I think if people start to study how that works and how the body is actually like a conduit, like a cavity for vibration, I think people start to realize that they are just sound and light, and that's how all of this works. It's actually pushed me into like the field of study. And here's a shameless plug. You can find me at the Paracosm Cafe on YouTube. That's it, guys. I hope you like it. Peace out.
Thanks, Michael. There's a lot to unpack here, But let's start with Skinny Bob. Apparently, the video containing footage of the alien entity known as Skinny Bob was shot by Russia's KGB and somehow leaked to the black market. You know, as these things tend to do. I won't dive much deeper, but you can find a link in tonight's show notes if you'd like to take a look. Now back to Michael's story. Michael's wild story. Here we go again with the possum. You may recall we discussed just last week 2 different stories about 2 possum-like creatures that left us with more questions than answers. But oddly enough, each of those possum-like reports was slightly different. So I did some digging. My assumption was that, like owls, possums are somehow used to cloak memories during alien abductions. But to my surprise, other than a semi-erotic encounter with a possum-faced creature reported all the way back in 2012, I found nothing. I know, I glossed over the semi-erotic possum-faced alien part. That encounter is in the show notes if you're daring enough to take a look. So then I get to thinking, is it possible that Michael fell asleep and was somehow mistaken or confused reality with a dream? If so, what was the rest of his family experiencing that night? And what did his girlfriend hear over the line? Is it possible that Michael somehow hallucinated that these otherwise harmless animals were alien abominations? Somehow, I doubt it. But it certainly wouldn't be the first time a possum was mistaken for an alien entity.
On the 400 block of Yondota, something
I'm curious.
is raising an otherworldly stink.
It was just stinking like crazy for how long? About 2 weeks?
Shirley Hansard discovered the smell under her front porch. A neighbor raked out the cause. What do you think it is?
I don't know. I got no idea. It looks scary.
This skull appears to be the culprit, and to some, it appears to be unlike anything they've seen on Earth.
Everybody around here says it looks like an alien.
Why do you think it's an alien?
Because the way it looks like it's got teeth coming up under its chin and like horns coming down.
10-year-old Josh Vollmer was convinced this was evidence of an extraterrestrial. Josh's mom called the zoo, the Humane Society, then the police. They quickly cleared the air.
Yeah, I don't think it's an alien. What do you think? Possum.
A possum skull might not get as much publicity as the skull of an alien, but it might be enough to inspire future scientists and storytellers.
Thought I pictured the back of the head.
Are you disappointed?
Yeah.
That clip comes courtesy of some of my old stomping grounds, WTVG, ABC News out of Toledo, Ohio. So maybe you guys tell me, what is the deal with possums, and how are they connected to all this? Until the answers seemingly fall from the sky. Thank you again, Michael, for sharing your tale. And that's going to do it for this episode. Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Addie Lloyd. All audio used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. And keep the party rolling by following us on social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit. And you can also now find me on Cameo. The terrifying score that you hear is Co.ag Music and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Thank you so much for listening, and until next week. So here's the deal. I listened to your requests and brought back the bonus story. It's here to stay. Now I need you to help me out with something. Please take a quick moment right now and text, call, or email someone that you think would love Monsters Among Us. Suggest to them, and I implore them to give an episode or two a listen. You know, Sarah and I have been dumping money into the show's growth, but let's be honest, good old-fashioned word of mouth is hard to beat. So please and thank you. And in return, here's this week's bonus entry. Please welcome Rick from Virginia to the program.
Hi, Derek. I'm Rick from Virginia. I love your podcast and appreciate the platform you provided to those who have experienced strange and unusual phenomena. Anyway, not long ago, the topic of praying mantis-type creatures or cryptids came up. Well, I have an interesting account involving these types of creatures that may interest your audience. In the late summer, early fall of 2000, I was a Virginia State Director for MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network. We investigated a case involving a number of different types of phenomena in Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia area. Unidentified triangular craft were seen, nocturnal lights, crop circles, orbs, cryptids, and poltergeist-type activity. Anyway, at this particular spot, this location, we investigated a case involving a family that was experiencing these types of phenomena. At one point, our team were investigating a wooded area behind their house. This particular area was somewhat interesting. While in this wooded area, one of our team members took numerous photographs. After the investigation, this team member reviewed the photographs and noticed something very unusual in one of them. Something appeared to be peering out from behind one of the trees. This thing looked like a classic praying mantis type creature, except the head was a bit more elongated, had what appeared to be antenna on its head, and the eyes were similar to that of a praying mantis. It appeared to be about 6 feet off the ground. Considering the possibility that this image may have been the result of what we refer to as matrixing, which is the brain's way of interpreting strange images, we took some control photographs of this particular spot and the tree later on to rule out any of the foliage, branches, or anything like that that could have accounted for this image. The control shots didn't show what could have caused the image. It was pretty clear. It didn't show anything sticking out behind the tree or anything like that. To this day, we really can't account for what was captured in the photograph. And if interested, I can try to find this image and send it to you in order to share with your audience. Again, thanks for all you do and keep up the good work. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Rick. And for future submitters, if you have photos, videos, audio, or other evidence to submit with your call, like Rick did, please send when you submit the call. That's easier than waiting for me to ask for it, and it makes organization much easier on my end. That said, Rick, if you're still listening, please shoot me the photo so I can not only share it with other listeners, but get a look at this thing myself. Now, in regards to these sightings, often referred to as insectoid or mantis man encounters, are not unheard of. One of my favorite calls to ever stem from this show was in regards to a mantis man seen in Illinois while a listener was out for a run. I believe that was the first episode of season 4 or 5. But like most cryptids, this one too seems to have a home location, and one that's not too awful far from Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia. The Musconetcong River in nearby town of Hackettsville, New Jersey, seems to be the reported home of the infamous Mantis Man. So to kill two birds with one stone, to share an experience from that part of the Garden State, and to possibly explain how, if the creature Rick photographed is real, it could have stayed undetected during the capture of the image. Here's a first-hand account from a fisherman named Paul Jacks, who witnessed a creature on the Musconetcong River back in the spring of 2006.
New Jersey gets a bad rap. This is actually a very beautiful area. A lot of parks, a lot of rivers, a lot of lakes. I've been fishing all my life. My father was a fisherman, so I started around 3 or 4. This particular day, my boss said, why don't we try going to the Musconetcong? I had never been there before. It was a creepy place. It's not completely in the wilderness, but when you're in the river, very often you're in a tunnel almost because of all the brush and the branches. When we entered the river, my boss asked me, which way do you want to go?
This place is just way weird. I'll go upstream.
So I started moving, wading across the river and down. That's when I saw the movement. When I first saw the creature, I was like, what the heck is that? This thing had the skin of a snake. Where our abdomen is and where all our organs are, it had a very narrow core. The creature's eyes were black, very large, but set in the front, so it had binocular vision. This thing seemed to be very concerned with me. I sensed astonishment, whether it was because I was in the water, whether it knew that I could see it. It was very aware that I was aware of it, and that seemed to concern it because it never took its eyes off of me. It was moving up the bank away from me, but looking back over its left shoulder directly at me. This thing was fading very quickly as it moved up the bank, and all that time never took its eyes off of me. It was 1, 2, 3, gone. It vanished completely, but I'm sure that it was still there. And maybe you question yourself, did that really just happen? But it did. It was a praying mantis, man. That's the only way I could describe it.
Now that clip is courtesy of Season 3, Episode 8 of Monsters and Mysteries in America. So Rick, you gotta shoot that image over to me somehow. Regardless of how you do it, my amazing team will be sure to find it and make sure it reaches my hands. And for the rest of you, I'll share it as soon as I can. Thanks again, Rick, for the entry, and thank you for sticking around to the end of the show. Have a good night.